Hey guys, welcome to this new tutorial on the LF1. And today we're going to just do a section of the model and start seeing what kind of detail we might need to model to get a nice section out, right? So you remember the last one we were dealing with this bridge here. And what you can see is that I have only geometry. I want to make sure that I have only geometry so I can pick curves. In this case there's something, I'm going to delete that, right? So I don't have any curves on the scene, right? This tool, selection tool, select curves, is really useful to make sure that you don't have any curves on the scene, or hide them, hide the layers that have curves, right? Because what we want to do now is just do a layer called section, and let's make it like a green color or so. And I want to just start testing what would be the section and what kind of detail we would need in order to get a nice section, right? So we're going to type section, and it asks us for the objects to select. Let's pick everything. You can say Control A, enter, and we need to specify where do we want this section through. Let's make sure that we're in the right layer, and then just cut through, right? So one thing I just realized is that we forgot to turn on the roofs. So you could say enter, delete that. Let's turn on the roofs. And it's good at this point that we mark with a line at least. Let's say if we're going to be doing a section that goes from through here, right? We could just position this line wherever we want. So maybe through here, right? So we keep trying our section. Eventually this will become also information for the plan, right? Where is the section going through? So let's try that again. Section, select objects. I'm going to select everything but the line. Select where is it going through, and you can see that we have our first section. Enter, and we can move this somewhere here, and we can analyze what we have, right? So we have the double roof, right? We have this element in the middle that is kind of flying around, and we have some of the details of the. So the first thing I want is just to have an offset of the base. That's very simple. We could extrude the surface, right? And we could say -1, and we could put this in floor, and this top would be duplicated, so we could just move it to extras in case we need it. But obviously this is a cleaner version of that surface, right? So that would give us a kind of a nice floor. So that's good. Maybe we want to duplicate. I mean, we want, this is a wall, right? So we want to just do the section of that wall. So we could check a bit the section. And this seems to be like a straight line, right? You can see that our section is a little bit silly compared to like the real one. You can see here, this is the way it's supposed to be, right? So that's quite straightforward. We could pick, this line is pretty nice. So let's model some of the detail based on that, right? So I'm gonna make a copy of this line. Let's explode this one. Just remove some of the control points. So this is the straight section of that line. We could rebuild it if necessary. degree one. No, it's fine. So we have a straight line. We could extrude it, and we'd have to say direction, that direction. So that's a perfect line for that curve, right? So we could now maybe having this line, we could extend it. Trim, offset, right? So we could start generating the material that we need. In this case, this line we don't care about. If we want to do this surface, we could do it by positioning this line here, zoom selected, and we could extrude this curve, specifying the direction, right? So this surface is coming to replace what we had before, right? So if we remove the roof, you could also go into X-ray or ghosted, and you can see that we had this one, and now we could basically, this new surface, just not to get problems with the selections. You can always isolate stuff, right? So cutting objects, this one, right click, and this guy becomes part of volume 1, right? So when we show again, we see that we have that surface the way it should be in the section. And we can keep on doing this kind of stuff, as I showed you, like to get a more precise model, and obviously like using the section as a tool to kind of identify and create more geometry, right? So for instance, one case that it's quite clear is this surface. You could do an offset surface, or you can basically copy it and then just like trim it with some of the other elements, right? Sometimes this trimming won't work because you don't have anything here, but you could just use some of the lines to trim, because you don't really care about what's going on in this back part, right? And you don't want any compromise on the detail of the corner. So you can always just offset this surface and then trim it around here where you have the connection with the walls, right? So you could copy this over here, and you can see that I would be in a position of trimming this guy with some curve from this element, right? And let's do that. If you want to just check it, we could say, okay, extract wireframe, and I'm gonna leave only this curve, delete everything else, so hide that guy. So you can see that we can always extend and extend here as well. The other trick that is easier, as we've done before, is scaling, right? you scale the object with the reference. So you make sure that you're trimming. Oops. So that element actually does work. You could also trim it, like again, the bottom part if you don't want to have the roof. But it's fine actually. Like you should be able to solve some details like this. Maybe we do want to just deal with this intersection, just not to get anything outside. So those two, you can see that there's kind of an intersection already in place. We can trim using this object, that element. So you see how we're kind of cleaning and finishing some details like that. And again, I would do that mainly for views and mainly for drawings as required, because some details would require more work, and in some other cases you can just go with doing that in the drawing, right? But if you have hundreds of drawings that you want to, let's say if you want to do a contour through the model, maybe you do want to finish quite a few details instead of just going each one of the contours and doing the 2D drawing, right? So if we do the section again, let's turn on some of these lines. So let's do section, right? So select the objects, and that's what we got. We can move that, and we can see that we're starting to get slightly better section. You can check these elements that are kind of intersecting each other. This is an easy trim here, and here we do have a line. You can see that we're starting to get closer. People has asked me how to do perspectival section. I would recommend to make a copy of the drawing. Let's say this section, if you wouldn't have moved it there, right, and use this line, so we could actually do it and test. I'm saving. I'm gonna save this file as a save as 12A perspective section. So you can literally trim the object with trim everything, right? I mean, to be honest, this should be done in the top view, right? Because that's the way of really getting it precise, but I think it's working pretty well. Right, so I think we did that already, and we remove the rest. So you're starting to get like these elements, a section of the drawing that you could use in perspective view, right? Where you would have the drawing itself, and then you could have the rest of the drawing as a make 2D or like or some other kind of technique where you could render and start mixing the uses, right? So depending on the detail of the drawing, in some cases you will have to maybe develop extra detail and check some of the problems, and then when you take this to Illustrator, you could just close these lines. Basically you want to have a joint, so let's try that. So for instance, I'm going to isolate this and I'm going to look at it from the side. So let's say that you want to have, I'm going to get rid of all the points, just selecting points, remove. So let's, I mean, this is a bit messy, right? But let's try to identify that we want to just create maybe one shape that goes through here all around. So I'm just trimming and trimming again. And let's try what happens if we just join everything. Do we get any kind of continuous curve? You see that we do get this one here. Right? So for instance, this is an interesting problem, right? We have this closed curve, right? But it has this island, right? So let's take these two to Illustrator and see how to deal with them. So let's take this to Illustrator by selecting the two curves, shift selecting the two curves that we want to export. Go to File, Export Selected, and we're going to call this section test 01, right? And we're going to say by default is this way, but we're going to just like start maintaining the scale of our drawings just in case we kind of want to export several things, and we're going to see how to do that. So for instance here I'm going to just say 1 meter is equivalent to 10 millimeters, right? So that's fine. Let's go into Illustrator, say File, Open, Section Test. So if we navigate here, we'll see that we have these two curves here, right? So this one we could fill it and we'll get that, but we have this other one, right? So we want this one to be an island somehow. So let's pick those two curves, and what we can do is just go to Object, Compound Path, and Make, right? So now the path has become a compound path, meaning that it has several curves defining the line. So you can see that we cannot select here, and this became like an interior of this fill, right? So that's very useful to actually have this complete section, right? So let's leave this drawing like this. So this is actually being pretty good. We could actually change it to some color like dark gray. That seems fine. We have the stroke information here, and let's go back to Rhino and let's try to bring some of our model back. So we have our model here, and you see that maybe I want to get rid of this, and I just want to make a 2D drawing of this. So we could say select everything and click Make 2D, right? If we say make 2D here, we will create the new layers, but one option that is interesting is that we could say that maintain the C-plane, so it will do the drawing not as a 2D drawing from the top view, that what would happen if we do this, right? So I can show you, right? If we do make 2D, we would get a 2D drawing on top view, right? We don't want that. We want to make 2D, select objects, and we want to say current C-plane, and you'll see that it created these two new layers, but they are exactly again in the same view that that we have here, right? So that's pretty good. At this point we should bring also back again the section and select these three, select objects, invert, and hide. And you want to make the export with everything together, right? Because you want them to be completely nested into each other. You don't want to start joining drawings in Illustrator, right? You want everything to be neat. So you'll see that some of this stuff would actually just work in Illustrator when you apply that fill, right? So we could just try to export this now. File, export, selected, test sec 02. Right, same scale. File, open. And you can see here that we could just maybe isolate these two layers and do what we have been doing before. Select this inner layer and say object compound path, make, right, move this layer to the top and turn everything back on, and you see how we start dealing with our section here. The hidden lines, we want to hide them. Maybe if we want to show them, we could just alt select and put them in some color that is very light, you know, and obviously you want maybe change the thicknesses, but you can see how we could start getting nice information here. Right, so I'm gonna show like a last variation of this drawing, doing it basic perspectival, and see a few problems that we might run into it. So if we go into our model, right, we can, in perspective, just select a view like this, right? You could always go into viewport properties and change the millimeters of this camera, right, to just get something slightly more dramatic. And we can pick that selection maybe there. If we want to save that, as we've seen before, we can always do a named view, save it as section, right, and close. One thing that we might want to do, because we want to just do a make 2D here, that would save a different layer for the lines and for the surfaces. So what I'm going to do here is just do a copy of the geometry by selecting polysurfaces and selecting surfaces, and going into my layers and create a new one, and I'm going to call all surfaces, right? And I can just make a copy of the geometry and place it here. So select objects, invert. So I have my view here only in one layer. You might wonder why I'm doing this, because the make 2D function has an option that it's actually quite good for maintaining the source layer, but we don't want to, and creates a lot of layers for us, but we don't want to do that for hundreds of different layers, right? So we want to maintain the geometry maybe in a simple way. So the other thing that I'm going to do that can come across some problems, the way the make 2D calculation works, I'm just going to select my section layer and I'm going to move it. I'm going to pick this corner here, 0.01, like nothing, like just, or you can like just a little bit, right? I'm pressing shift in this direction, and I'm kind of making a little bit of distance between the section and the actual geometry. Why? Because at the moment of calculating the make 2D, the geometry might, as it's being exactly in the point of these lines, it might just delete some of these lines, and we want to maintain as much information. And you can see that it's extremely still accurate, right? So that's looking good. Let's go ahead now and then go back to our set view, name section, and I'm going to select everything and say make 2D. And now I can actually say current view, that's fine, hidden lines, that's okay, and maintain source layers. As I said, this will actually create 3 layers with these names for my section and for my all surfaces. If I had my elements in all these different layers, I would get like 3 new layers for each new layer that I have, for each layer that I have. So that would be quite annoying to deal with. So in this case, we're trying to keep it simple. Say OK, and you can see that this created several layers already, 6 at least, 3 for each one of the layers. And we can go into the top view, invert the selection, and hide everything else, so we can only look at our objects here. And let's just see the visible ones, and we can see that we are getting, the Make2D won't maintain all the detail of the geometry, but we're in a decent position to really clean this drawing in a very quick way, right? This could become easily the fill, as we've seen before, but you have a perspectival version of this drawing. And that's it. I hope you guys liked it. See you guys soon.